November 5, 1975. The sun is dying over the Apache Sitgreaves National Forest in northeastern Arizona. The last bleeding edge of light slips behind the Mogollon Rim, that ancient escarpment of volcanic rock that cuts across the high country like a wound in the earth. The temperature is dropping fast. The ponderosa pines are going black against the sky. And somewhere on a dirt logging road, a battered 1965 International Crewcab truck is grinding its way through the dark, carrying 7 men home from a long day of cutting timber. They are tired, they are covered in sawdust and pitch. The heater in the truck barely works, and the men are pressed shoulder to shoulder in the cab, fogging the windows with their breath. The radio doesn't pick up anything this deep in the forest. There's only the sound of the engine, the rattle of chains in the truck bed, and the low, half-hearted conversation of men who have been swinging chainsaws since dawn. Then, through the trees, on the right side of the road, something is glowing. Not flickering like a campfire, not sweeping like headlights. This light is steady, golden, impossibly bright, hovering above a clearing maybe 90 feet away. Crew foreman Mike Rogers slows the truck. The conversation stops. Every man in that cab turns to look. And what they see, framed between the black trunks of the ponderosa pines, will change the trajectory of their lives forever. A structured craft, luminous, silent, hovering roughly 15 to 20 feet above the forest floor. It is disc-shaped, later described as roughly 20 feet in diameter, with a smooth, metallic surface that seems to pulse with its own internal light. It makes no sound, none whatsoever. It simply hangs there, defying gravity, defying reason, defying every frame of reference these men have ever known. 6 men in that truck will run, 1 man will not. His name is Travis Walton. He is 22 years old. He opens the passenger door, jumps out, and walks toward the light. Within seconds, he will be struck by a beam of energy so violent it will lift his body off the ground and hurl him backward through the air. His co-workers will watch it happen. They will flee in terror. And when they come back, minutes later, consumed by guilt and panic, Travis Walton will be gone. No footprints leading away, no blood, no body. He will stay gone for 5 days. And what he says happened to him during those 5 days remains one of the most detailed, most scrutinized, and most fiercely debated alien abduction accounts in the history of the phenomenon. This is the Travis Walton case, and this is Cosmic Casefile. To understand what happened on that forest road, you first have to understand who these men were. Because this is not a story about one man's claim. This is a story about 7 witnesses, 6 of whom watched something impossible happen to the 7th. The logging crew works for Mike Rogers, a contractor hired by the United States Forest Service to thin a section of overgrown timber near the small town of Heber, Arizona. Population barely 1,000. The kind of place where everybody knows everybody, where work is physical and pride is quiet, where men don't talk about their feelings and they sure as hell don't talk about flying saucers. The crew consists of Mike Rogers, Travis Walton, Ken Peterson, John Goulet, Steve Pierce, Alan Dallies, and Dwayne Smith. They range in age from 17 to 28. Most of them have known each other for years. Some are related. They are not scientists. They are not UFO enthusiasts. They are working men, earning modest pay on a Forest Service contract that Mike Rogers is already behind schedule on. They have no reason to fabricate anything. In fact, as events will prove, they have every reason in the world not to. The day of November 5th is unremarkable. The crew works a full shift in the forest, cutting and stacking timber. The work is grueling and monotonous. By the time the light begins to fade, the men pile into Roger's truck for the roughly 30-minute ride back to Heber. Travis Walton sits in the front passenger seat. The truck heads south on a Forest Service road, winding through dense stands of pine. It is approximately 6:15 p.m. when Alan Dallies notices the light through the trees. At first, someone suggests it might be the sun reflecting off a hunter's camper. But as the truck rounds a slight curve and the source of the light becomes visible through a break in the canopy, that theory dies instantly. Mike Rogers brings the truck to a stop. The craft is clearly visible, hovering in a clearing just off the road, above a slash pile of cut timber. It is luminous, gold and amber, shaped like a flattened disc with a subtle dome on top. It is completely silent. Later, several of the men will describe a low, almost subsonic hum, something felt in the chest more than heard by the ears. Travis Walton does something no one expects. He opens the door, steps out onto the dirt road, and begins walking directly toward the object. The other men shout at him to stop. Rogers will later say he couldn't believe what he was seeing, not the craft. But Travis, walking toward it like a man in a trance. Walton reaches a point roughly 15 feet from directly beneath the craft. He stops, he looks up, and then the craft reacts. A beam of blue-green light erupts from the underside of the craft. It strikes Travis Walton in the head and chest. The energy, whatever it is, lifts him roughly a foot off the ground, his arms flung outward, his body rigid. Then it throws him. Witnesses describe his body being hurled backward through the air approximately 10 feet, landing hard on the rocky ground with a sickening impact. Mike Rogers panics. He slams the truck into gear and floors it. The truck fishtails on the dirt road, and the men are screaming. Steve Pierce, only 17 years old, is crying. Ken Peterson later describes a feeling of total, primal terror, the kind of fear that overrides every other impulse. They are convinced Travis is dead. They are convinced they are next. Rogers drives roughly a quarter of a mile before the guilt hits. He stops the truck. The men argue violently. Some refuse to go back, but Rogers turns around. They drive back to the clearing. The craft is gone. The clearing is dark. And Travis Walton is nowhere to be found. They search. They call his name. They scan the tree line with the truck's headlights. Nothing, no body. No footprints leading away from the spot where he fell. No blood on the rocks. It is as though Travis Walton has simply ceased to exist. The men drive to Heber in a state of shock. At approximately 7:30 p.m., Ken Peterson calls the Navajo County Sheriff's Office from a gas station payphone. His hands are shaking so badly he can barely dial. Deputy Sheriff Chuck Ellison takes the call. Peterson is nearly incoherent. He manages to get out 4 words that will set the next 5 days into chaotic motion. I think we killed somebody. What happens over those 5 days of Travis Walton's absence is a black hole in the narrative, one that Walton himself will only partially fill upon his return. But his account, delivered under extreme duress and later corroborated through multiple investigative methods, paints a picture of an experience that borders on the unthinkable. Walton says he regains consciousness on what he initially believes is a hospital gurney. He is in tremendous pain. His vision is blurred. The air is warm and humid, and there's a strange, almost sweet smell he cannot identify. As his eyes focus, he realizes he is not in a hospital. He is in a small, curved room with smooth metallic walls. The ceiling glows with a diffuse, sourceless light. And standing over him, close enough to touch, are three beings. They are short, approximately 5 feet tall. Their heads are disproportionately large, domed, hairless with smooth, pale skin that Walton describes as having an almost marshmallow-like texture. Their eyes are enormous, dark, liquid brown, with no visible whites. Their mouths and noses are small, almost vestigial. They wear loose-fitting, tan-orange garments that resemble tunics. Walton describes being overwhelmed with terror. He screams, he thrashes. He grabs a cylindrical, glass-like object from a nearby shelf and brandishes it as a weapon. The beings retreat. They do not speak. They do not make any vocal sound at all. They simply watch him with those enormous, expressionless eyes. Then they leave the room. What follows is a fragmentary, dreamlike sequence. Walton describes wandering through a corridor into a larger room, a room with a chair in the center and a panoramic view of stars on the curved walls. Like a planetarium. He sits in the chair. A control panel of some kind is embedded in the armrest. He touches something, and the stars on the walls begin to move. Then a figure enters the room. This figure is different. This figure is human, or appears to be. Tall, muscular, with sandy brown hair and striking, luminous golden eyes. The figure wears a blue uniform and a transparent helmet. The figure does not speak either. It takes Walton by the arm, leads him through another corridor, and into a brightly lit room where two more human-looking figures, a man and a woman, are waiting. They place a clear mask over Walton's face. He breathes something in. And then there is nothing. The next thing Travis Walton remembers is waking up on a highway outside Heber, Arizona, lying on cold pavement, watching a disc-shaped craft rise silently into the night sky and vanish. He has been gone for 5 days, 6 hours, and approximately 12 minutes. The investigation into Travis Walton's disappearance begins before anyone has any reason to consider the possibility of extraterrestrial abduction. In fact, the initial focus of law enforcement is homicide. Navajo County Sheriff Marlin Gillespie arrives at the logging site the morning of November 6th with a search team. They find nothing, no body, no blood, no drag marks, no tire tracks other than those from Roger's truck. Tracking dogs are brought in. The dogs circle the clearing where the crew says the incident occurred and display agitated, confused behavior, but they cannot pick up a scent trail leading away from the site. Ground searches expand over the following days. Helicopters are deployed. Dozens of volunteers comb the forest. Nothing. Meanwhile, the 6 remaining crew members become the primary suspects in what Sheriff Gillespie increasingly believes is a murder case. The theory is blunt. These men killed Travis Walton, possibly in a workplace dispute, hid the body, and invented an absurd UFO story as a cover. It's the simplest explanation. It's the explanation the sheriff wants to be true. And it is the explanation that will be systematically dismantled over the coming weeks. The first major investigative development comes on November 10th, when all 6 crew members agree to take polygraph examinations. The tests are administered by Cy Gilson, a polygraph examiner contracted by the Navajo County Sheriff's Office, a man with extensive experience and no particular interest in UFO phenomena. Gilson tests each of the 6 men individually, asking specific questions about whether they caused harm to Travis Walton, whether they disposed of a body, and whether they actually witnessed an unusual aerial object on the night in question. 5 of the 6 men pass conclusively. Cy Gilson's written assessment states that the men are telling the truth when they describe seeing a luminous craft and witnessing Travis Walton being struck by a beam of light. The 6th man, Alan Dulles, produces inconclusive results, later attributed by Gilson to the extreme emotional duress Dulles was experiencing during the test. Not to deception. Years later, in 1993, Dulles will take a second polygraph and pass it cleanly. These results are staggering. Polygraphs are not infallible. No serious investigator claims they are. But for 5 out of 6 men to independently pass examinations covering the same extraordinary event is statistically profoundly difficult to explain through coordinated deception. Gilson himself calls it one of the most compelling series of polygraph results he has encountered in his career. Then Travis Walton returns. On November 10th, the same day the polygraph tests are being administered, a phone call comes in to Grant Walton, Travis's brother-in-law. It's Travis. He is at a gas station payphone on the outskirts of Heber. His voice is weak and slurred. He says he needs help. He thinks he's been gone for only a few hours. Grant Walton and Travis's brother, Dwayne, rush to the gas station. They find Travis collapsed in the phone booth, dehydrated, confused, and approximately 10 pounds lighter than he was 5 days earlier. He is wearing the same clothes he disappeared in. He has no injuries consistent with 5 days of exposure in the November forest, no frostbite, no hypothermia damage, no insect bites. He has a small, unusual mark on the inside of his right elbow that he cannot account for, a mark consistent, some researchers will later note, with a needle puncture or an injection site. Travis Walton is initially examined by 2 physicians. He is dehydrated, but otherwise in surprisingly good physical condition for a man who has supposedly been missing in a national forest for 5 days in November. His pupils respond abnormally to light. His blood sugar is low. His short-term memory is fragmented. He is emotionally volatile, cycling between confusion, terror, and a flat, dissociative calm that the examining physicians find deeply unsettling. The Aerial Phenomena Research Organization, APRO, based in Tucson, becomes involved almost immediately. Founded by Jim and Coral Lorenzen, APRO is one of the most respected civilian UFO research organizations in the country at the time. They dispatch investigators to Heber and arrange for Travis to undergo a comprehensive medical examination and, later, regressive hypnosis sessions designed to recover details of his missing time. The hypnosis sessions, conducted by Dr. James Harder, a professor of engineering at UC Berkeley and a consultant to APRO, yield additional fragments of Travis's experience aboard the craft, details that are broadly consistent with his conscious memories, but include elements of physical examination by the smaller beings that Walton had not previously recalled. Harder notes that Walton's physiological responses during these sessions, elevated heart rate, profuse sweating, visible trembling, are consistent with genuine traumatic recall, not performance. The National Enquirer, then running a high-profile series on UFO encounters, offers a substantial cash prize for the best UFO case of the year. The Walton case wins. Skeptics will seize on this fact for decades, claiming it provides a financial motive for fabrication. But investigators note that the logging crew's encounter and the initial police report predate any knowledge of the Enquirer's contest, and that the prize money, split among the crew and family members, amounts to a modest sum per person, hardly worth the years of public ridicule and professional damage that follow. The evidence in the Travis Walton case is not a single smoking gun. It is an accumulation, a weight of corroboration that, taken together, presents a formidable challenge to any conventional explanation. Start with the witnesses. 6 men, independent, working class, with no prior interest in UFOs, independently described the same event in consistent detail across multiple interviews, polygraph sessions, and decades of public and private scrutiny. Their accounts of the craft's appearance, behavior, and the beam of light that struck Walton remain consistent from 1975 through the present day. No crew member has ever recanted. Steve Pierce, who was the youngest and arguably the most vulnerable to social pressure, has repeatedly confirmed his testimony over the span of nearly 50 years. The polygraph evidence is particularly significant. In addition to the initial 1975 tests administered by Cy Gilson, Travis Walton himself underwent polygraph testing. His first examination, conducted by an examiner named John McCarthy for a television appearance, produced results that McCarthy characterized as deceptive, a result that skeptics have cited extensively. However, the circumstances of that test have been widely criticized. It was administered just days after Walton's return, while he was still in a state of significant emotional and physical distress. And McCarthy's methodology has been questioned by other polygraph professionals. In 1993, Walton took a more rigorously controlled polygraph administered by Cy Gilson, the same examiner who had tested the crew in 1975. Walton passed. Gilson stated that Walton was being truthful about his core experience. The physical evidence, while limited, is notable. The clearing where the encounter occurred showed no signs of conventional disturbance, no chemical residue, no burn marks, no landing impressions. However, Forest Service workers who returned to the site in the weeks following the incident reported an unusual pattern of accelerated growth and discoloration in the vegetation directly beneath where the crew described the craft hovering. This observation was not formally studied at the time, a fact that researchers have long lamented. Travis Walton's physical condition upon his return raises its own questions. The weight loss, approximately 10 to 12 pounds in 5 days, the dehydration, the puncture mark on his arm, and the abnormal pupil response are all documented in medical records. These are not the hallmarks of a man who spent 5 days hiding in the woods to perpetrate a hoax. If anything, they suggest a man who was somewhere he could not eat, could not drink freely, and was subjected to some form of physical procedure. There are also the negative findings that matter. Despite exhaustive searches, law enforcement never found any evidence that a crime had been committed. No body, no blood, no weapon, no motive. Sheriff Gillespie, who had been deeply skeptical and initially hostile toward the crew's story, eventually acknowledged that he could find no evidence of foul play and no conventional explanation for Walton's disappearance. The case also attracted the attention of serious researchers beyond APRO, Dr. J. Allen Hynek, the astronomer who had served as scientific consultant to Project Blue Book and coined the term close encounter, reviewed the case and considered it one of the most compelling abduction reports on record. Hynek noted the multiple witness component as particularly rare and significant. The legacy of the Travis Walton case is written in the lives it upended. Mike Rogers' logging contract with the Forest Service was never completed. The crew fractured. Some members faced years of ridicule in their small community. Alan Dowley's, haunted by the inconclusive polygraph result and the suspicion it cast upon him, withdrew from public life almost entirely. Steve Pierce, who was 17 years old when he watched a beam of light strike his co-worker and lift him off the ground, has spoken about the lasting psychological impact, the nightmares, the hypervigilance, the sense of being permanently altered by something he was never equipped to process. Travis Walton himself became, by default and not by choice, one of the most famous UFO witnesses in the world. He wrote a book, The Walton Experience, published in 1978, later expanded and reissued as *Fire in the Sky*. A major Hollywood film bearing that title was released in 1993, dramatizing the case with significant creative liberties that Walton himself has publicly criticized. The film's depiction of the abduction sequence, designed for maximum cinematic horror, bears little resemblance to what Walton actually described, a fact that has paradoxically both raised and undermined public awareness of the case. Walton has maintained his account for nearly half a century. He has never wavered on the core details. He has subjected himself to additional polygraphs, medical examinations, and hundreds of public appearances and interviews. He does not claim to understand what happened to him. He does not promote a particular theory about the origin or nature of the beings he encountered. He simply states what he experienced and lets the evidence speak. The 6 crew members, the men who were there, who saw the light, who heard the impact, who drove away in terror and then turned back, have largely done the same. And this is what makes the Travis Walton case endure. It is not a single person's uncorroborated claim in the middle of the night. It is 6 witnesses, 5 confirmed polygraphs, a 5-day disappearance with no conventional explanation, physical evidence of distress upon return, and a consistency of testimony that has survived nearly 50 years of scrutiny, skepticism, and relentless public pressure. Something happened in the Apache Sitgreaves National Forest on November 5, 1975. Something struck Travis Walton and took him somewhere for 5 days. The question is not whether the witnesses are telling the truth. The evidence overwhelmingly suggests they are. The question is what truth they are telling, and that question, after all these decades, remains unanswered. This has been Cosmic Casefile. Stay watchful.